story of the greatest stock trader that you've most likely never heard of is fascinating. It deals with human nature at its core and how success in one area doesn't necessarily translate to the rest of life. If the guy that I'm about to talk about was born in the 21st century, he would be the top of Wall Street bets every single week. He is the YOLOer of all time. He had strategies that would make Warren Buffett cry. This guy was ridiculous. He had, at points in his life, super high highs like presidents and the Rothschilds calling him up asking for favors, and the lowest lows. Let's see if we can learn from one of the most volatile men who ever lived how to live and trade. His name was Jesse Livermore. He was born in Massachusetts in 1877. He grew up extremely poor. His father wanted him to stay on the farm so that he could provide for the family. Jesse, who was considered a math prodigy for his farmhouse school of roughly 12, finished middle school by age 14 and made his first bet, betting on himself and running away from home. In 1891, he went to work for a small brokerage firm that was the middleman between traders in Boston and the Boston stock market exchange. He was one of the chalk boys putting prices of stocks from the ticker tape onto the chalkboard. He started to notice things about the ticker tape. Strange inconsistencies. Could this be he had discovered male astronomy? He could see the numbers form patterns, and he realized the people that were around him were not acting in accordance with the direction of the numbers, and were, in his view, acting irrationally. As he did his job at the chalkboard, he began to write down all the prices in his own notebook, and at the end of the day, he would study the patterns. He thought that he could trade better than the people who he assumed were just guessing on all the stocks. And then one night, the numbers spoke to him and told him, "You must start gambling in the stock market." From that point on, he listened. His second bet was quitting his job at the age of 14 and starting to bet in bucket shops. Bucket shops is a secondary market where you can bet on the price of the stock going up or down in like a 5-minute window. So it was basically the poly market of back then. So you didn't have to actually buy the stock itself. And yes, they did have insane, stupid derivatives before machine guns, airplanes, and women could vote. It's just ridiculous to think about. He went to all the bucket shops in Boston, and at 14 and 15, he was banned from every single one in Boston. But Jesse could not be dissuaded. He was like a squirrel to a nut, and he continued to plunge into the market under various disguises. I kind of imagine him as like a 14, 15-year-old boy pulling up in a trench coat with another kid underneath him doing the "How do you do, fellow adult?" He was known as the biggest gambler in the area at 14 and 15 and was so good at gambling large amounts of money at the derivative shops that he earned the name Boy Plunger. Boy because he was 14, and plunger because he would plunge into bets large enough to ruin almost anyone, taking on 10 to 1, 100 to 1 leverage, as much as he could basically get his hands on. He knew that he could just restart again because he had the skill of trading in these bucket shops. At 14 to 15, he made 10,000% returns. By 20, he had enough money to retire. He set his mom up and gave her a nice $2,000 house to live in. His mom reportedly was grateful and thought that her son might be doing something illegal because he was making a lot of money as a teenager, and warned him to get out of the market while he was ahead and to stop gambling. But as all degenerate gamblers know, it's not about the money, it's about the rush. And since he was banned from all the bucket shops and stock shops in Boston and the broader New England area, he had to broaden his horizons to a bigger, more chummier pond. The bigger pond appeared in the form of the Big Apple. Jesse Livermore now went by JL. He turned his measly $10,000, which he had won at the bucket shops in Boston, into nearly $50,000, a 5x return, which in today's money is roughly $1.56 million. A couple of months later, after one of the greatest bull runs in stock market history, he anticipated a correction and went short using 400% margin. Easy come, easy go, and he was wiped out, completely insolvent. Jesse never blamed the market. He said it was like a gambler getting mad at the cards of the deck, which it is like a gambler. He said that the tape was always right and the players were always wrong. All they had to do was to learn from the tape. Unfortunately, he didn't have the chance to learn anything in New York anymore. He had gained such a reputation as the boy plunger that no one in all of New England and the New York area would lend to him and take his trades. Jesse, ever the go-getter, borrowed $2,000 from a company before his insolvency reached them, and vanished to St. Louis. He began trading in the bucket shops in St. Louis under a different name because his name had reached the cultural zeitgeist and he was kind of like a stock market mini celebrity by this time, but no one actually knew who he was. So much like a LeBron or Wilt Chamberlain against plumbers and electricians, he dropped 100 on them day after day after day. He made $10,000 in 4 days. But that also meant that after 4 days, he was banned from every single bucket shop in St. Louis and the area around St. Louis in the Midwest. After his sentence of being in the Midwest was over, he was hungry. He went back to the biggest stock market in America, the New York Stock Exchange. He quickly paid back his creditors, even though he went bankrupt and he didn't really have to. He started trading again. His mistakes from last time, and now was working on new, improved strategies. Surely this time was different. But after months of trading flat on the New York Stock Exchange, he went back to a game that he knew he could win at. He disguised himself and started XP farming at bucket shops, almost getting killed by mobsters who ran the bucket shops. He was making them lose so much money to the point almost being insolvent. All of this so that he could fight the real crime of bankers, stock speculators, and businessmen that resided in the stock market. So with all of his winnings, he decided to crack something else. He married his wife Nettie in 1900 at the age of 25 and gave her literally everything she asked for, a nice house, jewelry, anything that she wanted. He continued to gamble and made around $50,000, which is around $2 million in today's money. But he could not help himself. Soon his $50,000 went back down to zero. This would have made for some of the greatest loss posting of all time, but it is nothing compared to what he would eventually do later. He asked his wife to pawn her $12,000 jewelry that he had just bought her a couple of months prior. His wife told him to get bent and divorced him, keeping almost everything, all the jewelry and the properties. So in one day, he lost his wife, his stocks, his jewelry, his property, literally everything. So enter stage left Hetty Green, the original but female and more eccentric Warren Buffett, someone who was very influential to JL's thinking about the markets. Her strategy was to listen to absolutely nobody and act with common sense and instinct over rumors and other people's strategies. She was very distrustful of all banks, and at one occasion, she said the bankers where she had all of her money were looking too damn prosperous. I don't like it. She then withdrew all of her money from the bank, and less than a week later, the bank failed, with most of the depositors losing everything. Jesse was almost the opposite of Hetty Green. He came from nothing, he spent extravagantly, he attended the nightlife, listened to rumors, he attempted to join the high society. He did take a couple lessons from her, that tips are useless and should be discarded as they're for suckers and they influence your psychology and decision making negatively. From this point on, Livermore made this a point in his system to never listen to other people. He once again returned to Boston to trade in bucket shops, of course under an alias and a disguise. He began to rig the game, finding illiquid stocks or commodities and pumping them, and then using secondary brokerage to dump the shares once again, netting enormously, around $200,000. He was banned once again, and instead of just taking the money, he did like a grand reveal in each of the bucket shops going around and being like, "Ta-da, it is I, the boy plunger. You all owe me $200,000. After getting banned from basically every bucket shop on the East again, he headed like a bear to a salmon fishery back to New York to trade in the real exchange. In the next couple of years, he made a killing speculating his way to $2 to $3 million, which is about $100 million in today's money. In the spring of 1906, at 29 years old, the boy plunger, now a full-on man plunger, was vacationing in Atlantic City. The market had been going up for a while, and his friend came up to him at the beach and said, "JL, you need to buy something. The market's so strong, you need to buy." Despite his rules-based system, JL broke all of his rules. He thought there was an opportunity that he could not pass up. He immediately frame-mogged him and sold short the entire market. His friend tried to convince him not to put his entire fortune into shorting the market, but every protestation, especially one that sitting in the sun had fried his brain, made him bet that the stock market would fall even more, and he used even more margin. By the end of the day, the stocks that he had bet would go down were up by 2%. He was about to lose everything. That night, the biggest earthquake disaster in California history destroyed over half of the industry in the Bay Area. By the end of the day, after the news reached New York in the morning and the market slipped about 4%, it rebounded above the previous day's prices. Jesse went again to his brokers and borrowed as much money as he could. He maxed everything out so that he could short the entire market. If the market did not go down, he would truly need an act of God to get him out of this mess. The next day, the market fell drastically, and Jesse made $250,000, netting $9 million in today's money. By the time he had turned 30, he had lost everything at least 3 times. If you've been counting, you know it's not 3, but there are conflicting reports on how many times he actually blew up his accounts. Some say upwards of 4, safe to say 3 at least. He was older, so he decided his strategy had to mature. From one of being just a boy plunger to being a man prober. Yeah, it says, don't look at me, I just make the scripts. His strategy was to send out probes into the market using no more than 20% of his capital. If it went up, he would commit more capital. If it went down, he would close out his positions and then put it into something else. Seems reasonable. The man prober ended age 30 going 30 for 30 with $30 million in his bank account thanks to his next move. In 1907, a panic swept the US and Wall Street. There was too much lending from the banks, and there was not enough real money, like paper money, to account for all the loans that everyone had, leading to a run on the banks and the bankruptcy of the Knickerbocker Trust and other trusts. JL, who had been anticipating this, had sent his probes out and now had an enormous short position. The stock market was failing, and JL was making millions every single day. Someone had to do something about the decline of the stock market, or the economy was at risk of a collapse. The financier and banker JP Morgan decided it was up to him to save everyone's businesses. Well, not the least his own. He was bailing himself out. He lent generously to other banks to save the banking system. Even after lending to all the still standing banks, the stock market still would not recover. They all feared that Jesse Livermore, the Great Bear as he was now called, was shorting the entire market, which he was, and they did not want to get in front of his freight train of shorting. JP Morgan sent one of his associates to deliver a personal message to JL saying that he should stop short selling because it was scaring the market. At first, JL didn't want to. He had the entire power of the markets controlled with his hands alone, and the most powerful banker in the palm of his hand, pleading with him. But he had to acquiesce because he realized that his money meant nothing if the United States system collapsed. The next morning, he announced he was covering his short position and buying stakes in stocks. He had gone from a lowly farm boy getting kicked out of bucket shops to being asked by the most powerful banker and the most influential person of the decade to stop the suffering of the American economy and market. Did this go to his head? A little bit. Maybe we'll see in a minute if it did. After buying his second yacht, which was in duplicate of JP Morgan's yacht, and going on vacation on it, he did this to try his strategy in the commodities market. He barely avoided bankruptcies, as I kid you not, he fought the Great Bull, him being the Great Bear. It was the perfect match. It was yin and yang. He got out of the mess in the commodities market with the Great Bull when he leaked to the press. Of course, every time he leaked something to the press, he denied it just so that he could say that he didn't. But come on, who else is leaking that? I mean, we're not stupid. That he had cornered the cotton market, meaning that he had bought almost everything in the cotton market and bought a bunch of cotton futures, so that when it was printed in the papers the next morning, it looked like the cotton market was super hot. Woodrow Wilson, now in the thralls of World War I, had a private meeting with Jesse and asked him, why have you done this, and can this be reversed? Cotton being above what the actual price should be in wartime is kind of a big deal and a major problem. His response was, to see if I could, Mr. President. That's why I did this, which is very childish of him. The president then asked him to sell his cotton or the US economy would be in trouble. He agreed to do this, of course at a marginal profit. So over the next couple of days, the retail suckers, as he called them, saw the price of cotton and heard, as the president had, that the biggest speculator of the past decade was heavily invested. They all rushed to buy cotton as he unloaded his shares. I swear JL would have been Elon Musk if he existed during crypto. He is truly a man before his time. After narrowly escaping his cotton fiasco, he decided to start his vacation in earnest, cheating on his wife with strippers / the NBA cheerleaders of the day, which were the Broadway's Ziegfeld Folly Girls. He also joined the most exclusive clubs that he could find. He attended Bradley's Beach Club in Palm Beach, Florida, which was a speakeasy and parlor that was owned by Mr. Bradley, one of the biggest gamblers of the era and most likely mafia related. I mean, who else has a network of spies and guards that could tell him about the whereabouts of anyone and everyone? This was a place that was so high society that the most informal attire was a tuxedo with no exceptions. What is fancier than a tux? I mean, are you wearing 3 overcoats and a dress shirt? Are you wearing 2 tuxes? Like, how can you possibly get more fancy than that? This was the Jeffrey Epstein Island of the day. They had people from Standard Oil, Chrysler's, Jay Gold, Vanderbilt's, Astor's, people from every single bank, the government, all the politicians, anyone who was anything in finance or entertainment or politics in the 1900s. Except instead of diddling kids, they would just lever up 100 to 1 on roulette, play backgammon, smoke cigars, drink gin and tuxes. This place existed until the late 1940s and the early 1950s, when, hear me out, Jeffrey Epstein was born as possibly the eviler reincarnation of this club. JL, who started to be a part of this exclusive club a couple of years earlier, started talking to the recently bankrupted Cotton King at Bradley's, since he had dabbled in cotton before, cornering the market. Despite all of JL's rules, foremost of which was not to listen to other people's tips, he was slowly convinced over the span of a year at drinks at Bradley's by the smooth-talking Cotton King. The Cotton King claimed to have spies in cotton industry and to have more information on cotton than any other man. He had just gotten unlucky, which is ridiculous. How can you have spies in the cotton industry? That's stupid. Under the Cotton King's spell, the lone wolf of Wall Street, Jesse Livermore, plunged into the cotton market, buying using most of his money. Within days, he was in the red and was forced to dollar cost average out of his position, which never went back up. He was almost broke again due to this Cotton King, who may or may not have been on the other side of the trade. We're not sure, but I'm gonna guess he was. He had been a millionaire for less than a year, and he was forced to sell the Anita Venetian, his JP Morgan yacht ripoff, and some of his apartments, which I'm sure was sad for him. Livermore, now desperate to regain his position as the biggest trader in the world, began trading every day, breaking the rules. Why break just one rule when you can break all of them? He just kept digging, but the hole was just getting bigger. Over the course of the next couple of months, Jesse lost a grand total of $5 million, roughly $250 million in today's money. As a result of the bankruptcy, he fell into a deep depression and lost all of his confidence. After a couple of months of moping around, he decided to study what went wrong. He had not stuck to any of his rules that he had before. He had listened to others, he had used excessive margin, he didn't even probe. He'd been listening to his ego ever since JP Morgan had asked him to stop shorting the market. He determined that his success in 1907 was the reason for his failure. He started trading again in a different city, Chicago, hoping his luck would change. The brokerage company that he went to said that they believed in him, so they gave him $25,000 to start, just for free. But it wasn't for the right reasons. The actual reason to give him $25,000, one, was for publicity, and a little more sinister is that the brokerage firm wanted JL to help embezzle money from the brokerage firm's owner's dying brother-in-law's massive estate. After Jesse found this out, he was already in too deep and would not give up his account. And by the end, he had helped preserve $250 million for this guy to keep. And after a couple of months, he returned to New York in 1910 with some of his winnings. He spiraled for the next couple of years. The market was moving sideways and was not good for him because he relied on momentum of the stock market going up or down. In 1914, at age 36, he decided to go bankrupt once again so he could clear his mind and get back to his peak. JL went to the same benefactor that had used him to embezzle $250 million and asked for a line of credit on his trading account. This time, he was determined to stick to his rules. For sure, this time was different, unlike all the other times before. And it worked. He was confident again. Without the constant threat of creditors, he didn't overtrade, he wasn't desperate. He was looking for the perfect time to buy and sell. Right on time, his ex-wife, like a moth to a flame, smelled his easy cash and came back to get $1,000 a week stipend from him. This guy was getting milked by his mistresses and ex-wives. It was getting ridiculous at this point. Even though his teeth were sore, he made up all the money he lost getting milked by remaining bullish and trading in the markets. He made a killing predicting the start of the US's involvement in World War I, and he was called up in front of the Senate to testify about his trading because they thought it was insider trading because it looked so irrational. There was no evidence of wrongdoing, so he was acquitted of all charges. The New York Stock Exchange then made a Livermore rule to stop traders from acting on new leaks and insider information, which of course didn't work and was more of like a finger wagging than an actual handcuff. But it's the thought that counts. It's the thought. Now ridiculously wealthy, he fell in love with another woman, Dorothy, a Ziegfeld Folly girl, which, if you remember, are the strippers of the day. In 1918, at age 41, after a short divorce proceedings with his now separated wife Nettie, in which he gave up his mansion, $1 million, and his car, he married Dorothy, the 18-year-old Ziegfeld Folly girl, which, if my math is correct, is creepy. So he bought her a massive jewelry collection, $12,000 ring for the wedding, a palace to live in. It had 29 rooms, 12 bathrooms, a bar, a basement, a bar in the basement, a full-time barbershop, multiple apartments, and townhomes. Even though he was now creepy, he was once again on top of the world. His wealth and reputation as the Great Bear grew over the next couple of years. He was blamed for every market downturn in every stock. By 1923, he had two boys, Paul and Jesse Jr., and had been actively trading for 32 years. He wanted to get away from the distractions and the tips of Wall Street, saying as he had before that all tips are dangerous, useless, they're for suckers. He moved into his office uptown, which of course, naturally, was the fanciest and most expensive one he could find. And he had 4 chalk boys around the clock write down quotes on the chalkboard that he would study all day. This seclusion, which was supposed to make his life more private, only helped add to his allure and aura of being an elite who controlled the markets. This led to a lot of exaggerations of his reputation over the next couple of years. A growing pool of speculators would speculate on what he speculated on because they thought that he controlled the markets. Jesse knew this and used this to his advantage, taking parts in pools with other speculators and driving the price of stocks higher with his publicity, only to unload the shares at the top or near the top. He was a classic pump and dumper. Like, again, this dude would have been incredible in the 2020s, just knocking it out the park. During this time, he was so secretive that it is not confirmed whether he lost this amount or not, but it is reported that he lost $8.5 million in Mexican Pete, which is petroleum, which at this point was not enough to even wipe him out. During this time, he acquired 405 guns and taught everyone in his household how to use them, saying that shooting was how he dealt with stress in the markets. It was also helpful to ward off the numerous kidnappers who would attempt to take his 2 boys and wife for ransom over the next couple of years, which later this probably helped contribute to some of the problems he had. One night, Livermore's home got invaded by 2 robbers. One of them was an ex-chauffeur. Chauffeur. He drove him and lost $500,000 worth of jewelry and cash. Just to demonstrate how high society was at this point, both the Rockefellers and Chryslers sent their personal investigators and security to help keep the residents safe and to investigate the robbery. In another case of the Livermores being robbed, the robbers called them earlier in the day and threatened them. The robbers, not being that smart, didn't even make it to the house and got arrested on the train platform right outside. It turns out that the robbers knew when to rob them because they were the front page of the tabloids pretty much every day. And Jesse and his wife would throw crazy extravagant parties and everyone knew where they were. This did not stop Dorothy, who was sinking into a little bit of alcoholism by this point, from throwing a ton of parties. In 1929, Jesse got accused of fraud in an 870-page paper that was the largest complaint ever filed up until that point. He was one of the major investors promoting a real estate development scheme in Boca Raton, Florida, in which an architect with no real estate development experience appointed his brother, a playwright, to oversee large parts of the operation. Everyone including Jesse, lost money. He went back to what he knew, the stock market, which is probably smart. The stock market was super hot in 1929. Jesse foresaw stocks going down and sold most of what he had. He started sending out probes to short the market using his strategy from before. He knew that this next bear run was going to be big, but he had to disguise his moves so that no one knew what he was doing. He used more than 100 different brokers and kept shorting the market. His reputation as the boy plunger, the great bear, and the lone wolf of Wall Street was about to have its biggest single test ever. The market could only go up. Every day he was losing money in the fall of 29. He would sit with his headphones on and watch his chalk boys write on the board. He sat there in silence and pretended he was a great composer, completing his greatest symphony ever, with every single number being drawn on the board his newest chord. Then, Monday, October 28th, 1929, the stock market collapsed, losing 12% of its value in a single day. Jesse added to his symphony with perfect timing. One last note, one last short, and he sat back. Speculators leapt out of windows. Businessmen who were millionaires on paper hours earlier died of heart attacks. Some of the richest men in America were now counted among the homeless and poor. Then Black Tuesday followed, and the markets continued to sink another 11%. By this time, the public was in an outrage. They needed someone to blame, someone other than themselves, of course, for the stock market collapse. And who better than the man who was making the most money off of it? The Great Bear, JL. The phone calls to his office wouldn't stop. His life and the life of his family was in imminent danger from all the speculators, gamblers, and even investors who blamed him for losing their own life savings. When asked about whether he caused the collapse in the stock market by the New York Times, he simply said this: "The public believes that a group of elite men can drive a stock far below its real value, its basic value. If such a stock goes down, the public then erroneously presumes that there's a group of super traders, super speculators, super financiers who are severely punishing the stock, pushing it below its real value to create an absolute bargain. The public wrongly assumes that smart speculators will not step in and buy it at depressed prices," which is something that I have, in not so elegant words, told my brother on occasions. Like, kind of preach, brother. Jesse, aside from preparing his speech on why shorting is actually a good thing, had prepared for this and had a small army on retainer at this point. He had like 8 different people guarding him and his family to deal with all the public backlash. When Jesse returned to his Long Island house at the end of the week, he was shocked to see that his house looked like it'd been looted. All the jewels were gone, the paintings, the antiques, all the luxuries. He asked one of the staff about it, and the staff, not knowing who he was, said, "Haven't you heard about the crash?" His wife, who had heard about the crash, had instructed the staff to put all of the valuable stuff in the guest quarters and to move everyone into guest quarters because they thought they were about to join the breadlines of the Great Depression. Instead, they were now one of the richest families in America. Despite all of Jesse's winnings, $100 million in total, about $2 billion today, which he made in a week, Jesse experienced his own Great Depression and became inconsolable. His wife Dorothy began to drink heavily and spent extravagantly. There was nothing that was not in the budget for her. She thought she was rich. She was. Jesse, being unhappy and depressed, started to try to fix his situation with a number of affairs, which he reportedly had multiple in one weekend, which again is hard to verify, but given its tabloidy nature, there's probably a little bit of truth, but also like a lot of exaggeration. He had multiple confirmed affairs with more Ziegfeld girls. His wife, who is an alcoholic, took the news hard when it reached her. She kept on drinking and drinking and drinking and kept on having large parties where she would just pass out. Jesse, for his part, partied. He went down to Bradley's club, ate lobster salad, hung out with the DuPonts and the Chryslers. On one such night, after spending the day hanging out at Bradley's in Palm Beach, he was playing bridge with Walter Chrysler, Alfred Sloan, and Ellie Culbertson. His wife knocked on the door and brought a cow into the room. She said that the cow, which was now standing in the living room, was so that the cream for his coffee was fresh like he liked it. The room burst into tears as Jesse attempted to escort the cow away from his $25,000 Persian rug before the cow started doing its business on it. His wife continued to get more eccentric, presumably because of her alcohol involvement in the amount of gumas her husband was sleeping with. Jesse's best years were from 1920 to 1931. After this, much like before, the success got too much for him, and his head started to fall off of his shoulders from his ego. He couldn't stop having affairs with showgirls. It was impossible for him. He couldn't keep himself away from them. No, they couldn't keep himself away from him. They smelled money. His wife couldn't stop drinking, and they couldn't stop fighting each other. The kids were sent off to boarding school, which they resented both their parents for. Dorothy, who was in the middle of being cheated on every day, felt it was only fair if she turned the other cheek and had an affair for herself, hooking up with Longscope, a semi-famous C-tier celebrity who was known for his undercover work busting speakeasies. He busted the speakeasies, of course, only after checking for about a week straight if the beer was poisoned or not, and then he would shut them down. She divorced JL and married dubious agent Longscope in 1932, one day after the divorce proceedings with JL had ended. Dorothy ended the marriage with a $3 million trust fund and $1 million in hand-picked stocks from JL. Dorothy, still mad at JL, sold all the shares of the hand-picked stocks, which, if she had just kept them, would have amounted to $50 million in 1950. She instead put them into railway bonds, which promptly failed. Livermore, who had lost his wife by his own doing and his kids by his wife, which was his own doing, sank like the Lusitania. He got more depressed and was out of his mind. Livermore began to see Harriet Metz Noble, who was an accredited singer and a New York area socialite. They were married within 6 months of meeting. Her previous 4 husbands had all committed suicide, giving her the name the Black Widow. Livermore's kids, for their part, hated her, saying that she had a foul aura about her that was depressing. Paul, Jesse's younger son, reportedly got so scared at seeing her that he ran across a field back into his dormitories, screaming and refusing to see her when she visited. Dorothy, Jesse's former wife, began to spiral. She returned to the estate in New York for a short time. She let all of her dogs run wild over the estate, which was practically abandoned at this point. JL had moved on to other residences. And her dogs did what the cow could not and soiled literally everything in the place. It was so bad that they just had to destroy the place after a while. This was like a place that was worth multiple millions of dollars. By this time, the foundation was sinking slightly to one side. Instead of fixing the foundation, she just cut all of the priceless furniture so that it was now flat against the sinking of the foundation, just so it could spite Jesse. So she leveled all the furniture, including a desk that belonged to Louis XIV that was worth over $100,000. The finest collection of artifacts and antiques in all of America up until that point was sold at the height of the Depression in an auction, along with the rest of the estate, for $168,000. The jade ornaments themselves were reportedly appraised just like 2 years prior for $310,000. Dorothy finally left the estate in New York and moved all the way to New York because she, quote, wanted to get as far away from the bastard Jesse Livermore as I can, and I want to get the boys away from him and his women. All through this time, Jesse was one of the richest men in America during the Great Depression, a depression that he partially composed, and in the minds of the people he did compose. He was getting death threats or attempts on his life and his son's lives every day. His now wife, Harriet, who had not known about the previous affairs, found out through the newspaper of his womanizing, and when one of the mistresses publicly sued Jesse for $250,000, this embattled his current wife with himself. Jesse continued to experience his own Great Depression. Jesse knew he was losing his trading skills because all the pressure and negative experiences were going on around him. He was no longer passionate about the markets. He stopped dressing nicely. He looked out of fashion. He started to wander around aimlessly. He was reported missing multiple times. The great bear of Wall Street was losing its claws. He stopped seeing his friends, the Chryslers, the Moores, the Durants. He stopped going to Palm Beach, to his rich boy club at Bradley's. He didn't even play poker, bridge, or backgammon. He was miserable. But when it rains, it keeps on pouring. His sons, who were despondent on not seeing their father, were constantly in trouble. They had discovered alcohol from their mother and women from their father. And this mesh made them perform very, very poorly in school. Harriet, Jesse's new wife, who hated sons because they distracted Jesse from Harriet's a 38-year-old woman, by the way. Like, get a job. What is she doing? Used this as an excuse to belittle Jesse's sons in front of them. Jesse continued to snowball in the wrong direction. He started trading very irrationally, and after lawsuit from his mistresses and exes and previous business partners, he filed for bankruptcy on March 5th, 1934, just 4.5 years after winning $100 million in the stock market in 1929. Success had once again taken its toll on Jesse. Even while Jesse was gone from Wall Street, there were constant rumors that he was on the other end of the market shorting it, and his bankruptcy was just a ruse to juice the market a little bit more. He was actually just in Europe to recoup. While Jesse was in Europe, Dorothy had divorced Longscope, the dubious agent, and was having a fling with D.B. Neville, someone who's another C-tier celebrity, who was most likely only interested in taking her money, which surprisingly had lasted longer than Jesse's despite her alcoholism. On November 29, 1935, during Thanksgiving, she stormed into a party to see her oldest son, Jesse Jr., had been drinking. Dorothy, who had just finished her stint of drinking and driving on the way over here, as every good 1930s woman does, went up to her son and told him that she would rather see him dead than see him drinking. She then shot him in the chest, missing his heart by inches, nearly killing him. And while he did recover after being sent to the ICU, he got a spine deformity for life. Jesse Jr. spent his time recovering, refusing to let both of his parents into the room, screaming in pain, cursing his mother for shooting him and his father for ignoring him his whole life. Dorothy got off on all charges after her defense was that I was drunk and I thought the gun was unloaded, which I'm not sure would fly in court today. Jesse got custody of his sons again, and his wife Harriet, who despised his sons, quickly sent them away to boarding schools. When Jesse Jr. recovered, he was sent on a trip to Europe to get away from his mothers. Jr. eventually married at 18. His wedding was only attended by his brother Paul, but his father did give him a Pepsi Cola franchise in Connecticut as a consolation gift instead of his presents. The franchise he later ran into the ground. By 1940, no one in the family was doing well, and the stock market was still flat. Jr. suggested that his father write a book on how to trade stocks. The book was uncreatively named How to Trade Stocks and was a massive flop. World War II was underway, and interest in stocks and Livermore was at an all-time low. Jesse was now an old man. It was November of 1940, and the now 63-year-old was feeling his age. This particular night, he went out to the Stork Club with his wife Harriet, Livermore's favorite. The photographer asked if he could get a photo of the couple. Jesse joked, "It's the last picture they'll ever take of me." And after furiously scribbling in his notebook, he was seen entering the cloakroom, but drew a .32 caliber revolver, one of the ones that had survived from his gun collection, and placed the barrel of the gun next to his ear and pulled the trigger. He died instantly. Jesse Jr. was the first on the scene. Paul, still studying, was rushed from school. His wife was now 5 for 5. She didn't even act shocked. She just took all the money that was supposedly in the trust for the kids and left the same week. The funeral that was held was small. For all the friends and people that he had met and supposedly made over the years. The only friends that actually showed up was Moore, one of his friends from the club, his wife Harriet, and his sons JR and Paul. The great lone wolf, the boy plunger, the great bear, was shot by his own hand. When they went through his estate, they realized he had truly been broke this time, minus whatever amount Harriet had looted before the estate was appraised. The total amount came out to $10,000 in assets and $361,000 in liabilities. Paul Livermore, his youngest son, settled down and had a relatively normal life. Most of this story comes from his memory and his point of view. He had a pretty good acting career in Hollywood, dying in 2002, while Dorothy, his mother, died in 1985 of natural causes. His older brother, Jesse Jr., went on to live a sad life of alcoholism, gambling, and philandering. He consistently beat his girlfriend and animals. He eventually drunkenly attempted to kill his girlfriend, ended up gassing himself with an oven because he was going to be sent to jail. His girlfriend, when asked about his suicide, said that he killed himself with an oven because he was too cowardly to kill himself with a gun. Jesse Jr.'s son, Jesse Livermore III, also committed suicide. The last remaining descendants of the Livermores are Tracy Livermore, who is an adult actress and conservative commentator who spoke for Turning Point USA before getting, as she called it, canceled by the woke TPUSA people, which is ridiculously funny. I wish I was making that up. That is such a funny line. The rest of the descendants I couldn't find anything on, but they most likely lead more private lives than Tracy. Jesse Livermore's story as the greatest YOLOer of all time is a cautionary tale of how YOLO means that you only live once, not that you get to live everything once. His unparalleled talent for risk-taking and speculation brought him many lifetimes of fortune and infamy, but without a strong moral compass, his wins were overshadowed by his losses, his bankruptcies, his infidelities, and self-inflicted depressions. He is proof that taking risks is necessary to achieve one's goals, but once you achieve, you need more grounding in what you actually believe in and stand for so that you do not lose yourself. His identity as a trader was inseparable to who he was, so when he failed for the last time, there was not a thought for the other roles like father, husband, or friend. It is truly tragic in a Shakespearean way. Let me know what other videos you guys want me to do. As of right now, I'm sending Livermorean probes out into the YouTube landscape and seeing what sticks. This was a topic and video that I really enjoyed making. I think it's a niche that no one's really in yet. So let me know if you want me to do anything on other historical people in the market. And no, I'm not going to do ancient Sumerian trading. Perhaps Hetty Green would be a good option. Or if you want me to do an analysis on like Vistry Homes or Exotron, the German semiconductor equipment manufacturer, or even a tour of where I live in Germany, or Kaput by Wolfgang Munchau. I think those are all good examples of what I hope to do. I'm down for all of those. Let me know in the comments below what you think would be an interesting video. This video took probably 3+ weeks at this point and over 80 hours of work, and I haven't even started editing this. I mean, it's just a lot. Way more than I thought, to be honest. I originally got this idea when I read 1929. Shout out my mom's friend for giving me that book. I'll leave the links to all the research that I did in the description. Thanks for watching. Bye.